A new report released by Rabobank found that while money can't exactly buy happiness, those who've got a bit were happiest because, personally speaking, financial stress is that. It is stressful. Puts a lot of strain upon a marriage especially. Here's the good news. There are things you can do to reduce your level of financial stress and strain, and investing in property is one of the best ways to achieve financial freedom. Has that raise the freedom, the liberty flag? It's tried and tested, tangible, and with the right advice, it's perfectly achievable. Lloyd Edge is the Director of Australian Property Professionals. Lloyd was a music teacher, still has music in his bones. I was tapping my foot and he noticed I was in time to the ad you just heard. But he turned his attention to investing in property and has achieved an enviable level of financial freedom, and thankfully wants to share the knowledge on 13 12 83 tonight. Give him a call. Welcome, Lloyd.
G'day, Nick. How are you going tonight?
Great, thanks. So, markets in Sydney, Melbourne, other areas, Brisbane, have been posting big growth, impressive growth. Is property a get-rich-quick scheme?
I'll definitely not call it a get-rich-quick scheme. It's definitely something you've got to do for the long term.
Yeah.
When you look at the property markets, you've really got to look at the cycles, and the property markets have a cycle of around about 7 to 10 years each, sometimes as much as about 13 years. Now, during a property cycle, most of the growth only occurs in about 2 to 3 years of that cycle, and the rest of the time the markets can actually be sitting flat. Now, if you've owned property in Sydney and Melbourne, you've actually done quite well. You've been very lucky, and the growth has been a little bit more extended than just those 2 or 3 years.
What do you think it's been out to? 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, well, it has been probably since about 2012, 2013. So about 4 or 5 years, you've really had some really good growth there. But for those that have been around for a while and gone through a few cycles, there's definitely been, people remember times where the markets have gone flat and everything. So the worst thing you can be doing is trying to predict hotspots and thinking, well, okay, if I get in now and this market's going really, really well, then I'm going to become very rich at it. You need to look at a long-term strategy, not just thinking, yep, I can get rich now, because outside Sydney and Melbourne, most of the markets around the country have actually sat fairly flat, even during the boom periods on the East Coast. And if you look at places like Western Australia, that on the back of the resources slowdown, Perth has actually declined.
Gone backwards.
Places
there are now worth less now than what they were, say, 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, so it hasn't happened everywhere. So you do need to, but that doesn't mean that if you have property in Perth, you're doomed. But it does mean that you've just got to ride through that. Just like during the GFC, people who had property generally did quite well by holding it for that long period through there, because it's now done quite well, whereas if you had shares, people lost quite a bit of money during that period. So property is it's quite a steady, stable asset, but it's definitely something you need to do for the long term as well.
13 12 83. Lloyd Edge is here tonight to help you with some financial advice in getting yourself into the market, potentially like he's done, building a portfolio where properties leverage off each other. 13 12 83 is the number. We'd love to hear from you. Why is it important to devise a strategy, Lloyd?
You really need to know why you're going to invest and what it's going to do for you. So whether you're investing in property or any other type of investment, you want to know why you're doing it. And that really comes from what your plans are for the future, what your financial and lifestyle goals are in 10, 15 years' time. Are you planning to retire? Do you have young kids that you need to factor into the equation to be able to put through school? Do you want to be able to go on holidays and not worry about where the money's going to come from? All of these things can be achieved through property, but the worst thing you can do is just go and buy any random property and hope for the best. And when I first started investing, I was doing that.
Random?
Well, kind of. And some of them did quite well, fortunately, because they were in well-located areas such as suburbs of Sydney. But I was going random and didn't really know what I was doing, where I'm now completely the opposite to that. It's all about strategy. It's all about where I want to be. And when I'm talking to my clients and to people about their investing, it's really about where they want to go, because the different types of properties need to complement each other in your portfolio. Whether you're buying high growth properties or high cash flow properties, they all have a purpose. So you need to have a strategy to know how that property is actually going to fit into your portfolio and how it's going to help you achieve your long-term goals.
I know that you're a big fan of the dual income capabilities of some properties.
Absolutely. Well, the thing about dual income is that it's just that it gives you two lots of income, and there's a lot of benefits to that. One of those benefits is the fact that it allows you to keep going in along with more properties, because once you've got a couple of properties and the banks are starting to tighten their reins a bit, if you go and get a dual income property and then show to the bank the sort of cash flow that you got injected into your portfolio, the banks are suddenly happier and they'll lend you more money. And that's one of the things I used to help get myself moving forward quicker. And so the banks would keep saying yes, was just having better income with those portfolios. Now, the thing is that they're expensive to do in capital cities, so that's where you go out to some of the country areas where you're looking for higher cash flow and things like that, where the long-term growth may not be as high, but it's offset by high cash flow, and that's where the balance of growth versus cash flow comes into the fact when you're getting a lot of, a large lot of properties.
Talking property tonight, Lloyd Edge is here, and we can take some calls now. 13 12 83. There's a couple of lines are free. 13 12 83. I want to know whether you've got any particular spots you'd recommend when we take into the fact that there's people in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane tuned in tonight, as you say, that might have these dual occupancy capabilities.
Yeah, so in terms of dual occupancies, I would definitely be looking at areas around the Newcastle and the Hunter region in New South Wales.
And sorry, dual occupancy or dual income streams is perhaps broader for you, but that's what I meant, dual income streams.
So dual income stream is kind of the same thing as dual occupancy. Okay. So you can be looking at a duplex, or you could be looking at a house with a granny flat out the back. But either way, some of those markets that are very friendly for that are Newcastle, Hunter region. In Sydney, the Blacktown Council is very friendly for having granny flats. So it's quite expensive to buy a block of land and then erect a duplex or something there. But certainly putting a granny flat out the back, they're very friendly with that. If you move out to areas of Brisbane, then there's certainly areas in the Logan Shire, out of the Ipswich, and also down towards Pimpama. Is really quite good, and quite an area that's starting to happen as well in terms of good growth. So plenty of areas for those dual occupancies to come along there. Okay,
now is it quality or quantity when you're considering getting a portfolio together? What do you go with? More or better?
It's always better to go with quality. So you're better to have one good property that performs really well than 10 bad properties. So you could buy one property in a really good performing suburb in a capital city that gets good growth will be much better than having 10 properties in a country region where you don't get any growth and potentially go back where your property becomes less, because at the end of the day, it's the capital growth that's going to create you that wealth. So you really need to be have a property that's over time is going to make you money, grow in value, and the cash flow from it will improve as you go. Although it might start off being a little bit on the negative side, but if you're in a area where you've got lots of cash flow, and some people are attracted to just having high rent from their properties, the rent really just pays off their debt, and 10 or 20 years later, you'll still be having rent which is just paying off the debt, but no growth. So you really need to be looking at the capital growth, and by buying properties in well-located areas.
In having said that, do you think that having more homes spreads the risk, though, more effectively?
It does spread the risk, absolutely. But again, it becomes down to well-located areas. So you can spread the risk by buying you could buy something in Box Hill in Melbourne, you could buy something in Blacktown in Sydney, you could buy something in Acacia Ridge in Brisbane, you could buy something in Newcastle. You're doing really well. But you don't need to go out to various areas where you're not going to get much growth, such as Broken Hill or something like that. Sure. So you need to look at the areas that have all the drivers for capital growth.
Yeah, all right. I like this phrase that you often wheel out. You make your money when you buy, not when you sell. What do you mean by that?
Well, the thing about that is, if you pay too much for a property, then you're missing out on perhaps years of growth. Because the thing is that when you buy a property, you want to make sure that you're actually building some sort of equity at the front of that deal. So if you're paying too much for the property and then you hold it for 5 or 10 years, then you won't be getting this sort of growth. So you need to try to get it either under market value. You need to try to find something about the property that you can add value to straight away. So it might be a property that might need a renovation to the kitchen or the bathroom. You could maybe add an extra room. You could even do some kind of a subdivision or add a granny flat somewhere. Those kind of things are ways that you can actually add value, which means that when you're buying the property, you're actually making your money up front because you can see the value that you're making straight away. If you buy something, say a brand new property off the plan or something, it's very hard to make money that way because you're already paying even the developer's profit there, and it's hard to make money that way. And then you might be holding the property for a few years and missing out on those first few years of growth.
Yeah, 13 12 83. Lloyd Edge is here and guiding us through some considerations when you're buying property, how to improve it, those sorts of things. 13 12 83. He's here to help you. There's a lot of discussion, a lot of rabble in the media. The business of real estate, is constantly in our ears and eyes. When media is talking about it so much, do you think that we should pay so much attention to it when it's so noisy, or do we need to kind of be quite discerning about what we take on board?
I think we need to be careful about what we listen to because every second day there's some kind of a story in the media, and they've always got different angles, and everyone sort of loves a bit of a bad story because it gives them kind of a reason to talk about and a reason maybe not to do something. But when you think about it, every bad story you hear about property prices crashing really hasn't happened. And on the offset of that, the other side of that, all the stories about potential hotspots, they don't happen either, which comes back to me why we're saying at the start why you need to invest for the long term, because you can't really just predict the next area that's suddenly going to boom and you're suddenly going to be rich in 6 months. But also, unless you bought in a mining town where things didn't go so well for you, most of the time, if the property prices have done quite well, and we haven't actually lost out either. And in terms of interest rates and things like that, they're at their lowest ever period at the moment. So even if they do increase a little bit at the moment, then I wouldn't be worried about that because that actually means that the economy is doing well. So I don't think people should be too worried about that. And at the end of the day, people should be getting professional advice and really doing some research, not just listening to what's on the media. Or what people are saying at Sunday barbecues or anything like that. Lloyd
Edge from Australian Property Professionals is with us tonight and offering advice on 13 12 83. Here's a great question from Paul in Ashfield. G'day, Paul.
Oh yeah, g'day. How you going?
Good, mate.
Hi, Paul. How you going?
Good. Listen, we're selling our place over in the Ashfield area, and we're actually considering just renting back instead of buying back in this market.
Yep.
And we'll probably end up with around about between $800,000 and $1 million in equity.
Yep.
So we're kind of thinking about maybe 2 or 3 investment properties, Central Coast, Narara, or and putting 40% of our own money in, and maybe doing a loan of the other 60% on each one.
Sure.
But I just want to get your advice on what you think sort of that sort of strategy.
Well, I definitely think that you need to look at the areas to invest, and certainly probably get outside Sydney because Sydney's very much at the top of the market and overpriced a bit at the moment. So looking probably to diversify a little bit, I'd probably be looking at doing something in Brisbane and probably something on the Central Coast. You probably be a little bit careful of the Central Coast because it's actually had a lot of growth the last couple of years, and you might be buying at the wrong part of the cycle. The thing I like about Brisbane at the moment is that the price point is really good there at the moment, probably about 75% cheaper than an equivalent property in Sydney. So you can really get some good value for your money up there because the market hasn't moved yet. So I'd be looking at probably diversifying and maybe doing a couple of properties up there. And then maybe if you wanted to do a third one, you could probably look at doing something within the Newcastle market. But certainly with that sort of equity, diversifying that so you can probably do about 3 properties with that, but in different sort of areas and probably different types of properties. So you could buy a good townhouse in one of the inner suburbs of Brisbane, such as Morningside or Cannon Hill, and then down at Newcastle, you could buy a house with a granny flat potential at the back with in an area like Shortland or so. So hope that helps.
Thanks, Paul. 13 12 83, and appreciate your time tonight. Lloyd Edge, Director of Australian Property Professionals. We can get you on your number, which is 1800 146 837. And the website is auspropertyprofessionals.com.au.